Hey guys, yesterday I watched a very good documentary called In Search of the Last Great Action Heroes. It's a nostalgic documentary that takes a look at some of the best action movies from A-list box office hits to low budget, straight to video and movies and TV movies that were released around that time that starred a lot of famous action stars like Sylvester Stallone, Arnold Schwarzenegger, mm, Clint Eastwood, Charles Bronson. um, Cynthia Rothrock and Sigourney Weaver, and directed by a lot of famous directors such as James Cameron, Ridley Scott, some a lot of other B movie action directors. Forget their names that quick, but yeah, it shows clips from a lot of the movies they discuss, and it doesn't feature interviews with Chuck Norris or Arnold Schwarzenegger or Sylvester Stallone or Bruce Willis or any of those that they cover, but it does feature interviews with Michael J. White, and mostly features interviews with the some of the directors, writers, composers, producers who were involved in the stuntmen who were involved in those movies, and they told some pretty interesting stories about how those movies were made, and some of them is just cool, interesting movie trivia that you could just look up on IMDb. While a lot of it is also like some of it is also like funny behind the scenes antics that made you chuckle. when and it goes into discussion later how the action movies of today, like how they mostly rely on CGI instead of practical effects, and what sells the movie these days is not the guy or the girl who's starring in it, but the character they're playing and the story that the movie's about, and it takes a nostalgic interest in how they wish more movies were like they were back then instead of the way they're sold now, which I kind of do wish too. And it also features interviews with modern action stars who still do make these kind of movies today, but they're on like a lower budget, mostly straight to video, straight to streaming, and the that one of the actors they interview is Scott Adkins, who talks about how watching those movies inspired him to get into martial arts and UFC, and later become an action star to make those types of movies. And I really enjoyed this documentary. It was pretty intriguing, and it's a what's rare for documentaries like this. This one's like 2.5 hours long. Most documentaries like this are either like an hour and a half, and I'm glad it was 2 hours and a half because it gave them more time to go into more details and cover a lot of movies that most documentaries like this just skip over that you wish they had at least mentioned in passing. But some movies they discuss in detail, and others they just mention briefly, but or just show clips from in the montages. But I'm glad they feature them in here either way. And I did not grow up with a lot of these stars. At least when I was a little kid, I think the first Arnold Schwarzenegger movie I remember watching when I was little was what was it? Conan the Barbarian. Yeah, I watched that when I was 4 or 5 years old with my mom when it was on TV. Of course, it was the censored version with all the violence and love scenes edited, cut down, or taken out. And because that was the only way I could watch an R-rated movie, and if it was an edited version. And I think the first uncut R-rated movie I actually watched was Jerry Maguire when I was little because my mom told me I wanted to see that little boy in it that she said I looked just like back then. Anyway, I did not grow up with like Keanu Reeves, Schwarzenegger, Stallone in the sense that other people did, where they watched them since they were little. I got more into those actors when I was a teenager, when my mom started letting me watching those types of movies when I was maturing, and I became a huge fans of them since. They would like take a blank tape and record whenever there was a Steven Seagal or Schwarzenegger movie, and the superhero genre I wasn't much of a fan of either when I was a kid. Although I loved Batman because I grew up with the Batman animated series, I also grew up with the X Men animated series, and I I got a few episodes of the Spider-Man animated series, but didn't really get into it until after the first live-action Spider-Man movie was released. Yeah, I didn't keep up with the superhero genre as much as I did with like regular action movies, like the ones mentioned in this documentary, until like the 2000s when they started doing all these like Spider-Man, Iron Man, Batman movies that were more pumped up. That's what really got me into the superhero genre. So the superheroes for me when I was a kid were either I always been a huge fan of westerns, so superheroes for me when I was a kid were like John Wayne, Roy Rogers, Clint Eastwood, uh, Chuck Norris, because I did grow up with Walker Texas Ranger, yeah, and or I was also a huge fan of Swashbucklers like Three Musketeers, Zorro. That was my favorite superhero. Always been my favorite superhero, and so I didn't get into the more pumped up hardcore action movies with Stallone, Schwarzenegger, Jean Claude, whatnot until I was a teenager. But I really enjoy those kinds of movies, and I wish they would make more movies like that today. And I give credit to Scott Adkins for keeping that genre thriving, even though it's low budget now. But this is a pretty interesting documentary. If you haven't seen it, I highly recommend it. I give it two thumbs up. All right, that's my review. If you like it, please hit the like button, subscribe for more great content. Thank you, and God bless you. Bye.